Touchdown, Alabama, let's get it.
The process, no one can stop this. Hottest show in the streets, I bet you can't top this. Rammer, jammer, yellow hammer, come see how we rock this. Alabama fans the best, there's no way you can top this. Recruiting news and interviews, just sit back and watch this.
Recruiting news and interviews, just sit back and watch this.
The process.
Welcome into The Process, Crimson Tide Recruiting. For all of our first-time viewers out there, The Process is Touchdown, Alabama's premier recruiting show where I, Justin Smith, breaks down the latest in Alabama football recruiting news. And on this episode of The Process in particular, I wanted to take a look at some early candidates for a possible flip to Alabama in the 2021 recruiting class. I know it's early, but when you look at Alabama's last couple of recruiting classes, they have really been the beneficiary of some great flip situations. We can go back to the 2019 recruiting class. Alabama starting linebacker this past season, Christian Harris, was once verbally committed to the Texas A&M Aggies, and he flipped his commitment to the University of Alabama. And I think this is a situation that really helped Alabama this past season. I think it's something that Alabama is going to really use moving forward with Christian Harris growing more and more into that inside linebacker position for the Tide on next season. Even in this past recruiting class, when you look at the 2020 recruiting cycle, Alabama picked up five-star quarterback Bryce Young, who was once verbally committed to the USC Trojans, and he verbally committed to the Trojans very early on in the 2020 recruiting cycle, similar in the time frame where these guys verbally committed to the school of their choice, and Alabama was planting the seeds for a possible flip with Bryce Young early in the 2020 recruiting class, and they are currently doing that with a couple of guys in the 2021 recruiting class as well. And I wanted to take a look at those guys on this episode of The Process. But before I get to that, I always want to hit you guys with those recruiting updates as always. And one of those updates really prompted this topic on this episode of The Process, when I got a chance to catch up with four-star defensive back in the 2021 recruiting class, is Cochran with Cochran, who is currently verbally committed to the Florida Gators, and he told me that Alabama was still pushing for him very hard. They were telling him that he was a priority for them in the 2021 recruiting class. So he is one of the guys I'm going to talk about later on in the show. So stay tuned as I get a chance to break down some of the guys Alabama is looking to flip in the 2021 recruiting class. Alabama also recently gave out a couple of offers. Two of those offers went out to offensive linemen. One of those guys is Maximus Gibbs out of California. I will have a story on him on touchdownalabama.com shortly, so stay updated with everything Alabama football recruiting news and everything Alabama football related with touchdownalabama.com by picking up a subscription. But to get this show started today, I do have a recruiting question that I do want to get to, so that's what I'm going to go to next. So with that being said, let's get the process started. I'm going to go to my recruiting question now. As always, you guys can call into The Process at 205-440-3968. Call into The Process, leave your recruiting question via voicemail, leave your question after the beep, and it will be answered right here on The Process by yours truly on Touchdown Alabama's YouTube page.
Hey, this is Paul Webb from Tide Talking Web. Got a quick question. When it comes to recruiting, how much did the strength and conditioning coach factor into kids signing with Alabama? As far as, do you know if Scott Cochran was assigned like a region and he had certain kids, like maybe 5 to 10, that he was in on, that he recruited personally? Or was he basically like an ambassador when they came on for junior and senior days and stuff like that? Would he kind of court the kids around and talk to them then? Or was his role kind of secondary, or was he ever primary for any of these big targets we've ever had in the past? Was he a primary recruiter for any of them? And if so, how do you think him leaving will affect the program? Bye.
Thanks so much for the question. I know a lot of questions have been surrounding Scott Cochran's departure to the University of Georgia, joining Georgia staff as their special teams coordinator, and how that would possibly have an impact on Alabama football recruiting. As far as Scott Cochran being assigned a region and being assigned certain kids, no, it wasn't really that, but I think his name carried a lot of weight, basically looking at all of the guys that came into the University of Alabama, and they always talked about Scott Cochran once they got to the next level saying that, yo, once we get the chance to play in the National Football League, your practice is easy, strength and conditioning is easy based off what Scott Cochran did for Alabama, did for those guys when they was at the University of Alabama. You also just look at those guys, and when you hear about Alabama over the last couple of years, especially over the last decade or so, you always talk about how strong those guys was, how competitive they were on the football field, and all of that went back to Scott Cochran. Everybody saw that, people looking from the outside looking in, fans saw that, and players saw that, and potential recruits see that as well. They see Scott Cochran as a guy who really could help develop them, and that's something I really heard from recruits a lot when they were looking at Alabama. They basically just brought up Scott Cochran with his ability and with the credit and with the resume that he has. They basically just talked about how they know if they come to Alabama, they're going to be developed, they're going to get stronger, they're going to add on their weight because they can depend on Scott Cochran. Their parents believed in that, and a lot of people believed in that. So that's what I think Scott Cochran brought to the table. It was his resume that really affected recruits. I don't think he was just a big time guy where a potential recruit say, yo, I'm going to Alabama just because they got Scott Cochran. I don't think it was anything like that. It was just his added essence that he brought to the University of Alabama's football team, that strength and conditioning program. It was a plus. It was something that probably made Alabama stand out among other factors. Of course, they looked at Alabama's head coach, Nick Saban. They looked at the facilities. They looked at Alabama's success over the last couple of years. And the fact that they had Scott Cochran there right at the helm, too, was a plus. So I think it's a huge loss for Alabama, no doubt about it, because his name carried a lot of weight. But I think if Alabama does get another guy who has a great resume and can show that he can develop players, I think Alabama will be just fine without Cochran. Now I'm going to talk about a couple of guys who Alabama is targeting to possibly flip during the 2021 recruiting cycle. And the first guy I want to talk about is four-star defensive back Cochran, who will line up for IMG Academy for his senior season. He transferred from Stevenson High School in Stone Mountain, Georgia after his junior season, so he will play his senior season in Bradenton, Florida, and get a chance to compete against some of the top talent in the nation at IMG Academy. So he's going to grow a lot during his senior season. But as far as Alabama is concerned, I got a chance to catch up with Cochran very recently, a couple of days ago. I am going to drop the story in the description. You guys can read a little bit more about the situation. But he did tell me that Alabama's coaching staff has been in contact. They actually re-offered him during the month of January last month, and they have been heavily in contact as of late. They have told him that he is a priority for them. They want him to come in and make an immediate impact. So I think Alabama's gonna push and fight for him as long as he say his recruitment is open. He did say he does not have a visit date set to visit Tuscaloosa anytime soon, but he is looking at possibly visiting Alabama in the near future. So when you look at Cochran, he is the first guy to talk about Alabama's gonna work to flip, basically plant the seeds at the moment to get a flip later on in the 2021 recruiting class. So Cochran is definitely a guy to watch out for. Lee Hunter, a five-star defensive tackle out of Blunt High School in 8 Mile, Alabama, who is currently verbally committed to Auburn at the moment, is another guy Alabama will push for moving forward. When you look at Alabama's last couple of recruiting classes, the 2019 and the 2020 class, they have made it a priority to pull as many in-state kids in as possible, and Lee Hunter is definitely one of those guys they're going to want to target. When you look back at the 2019 class, they did pull in an in-state defensive lineman and interior defensive lineman in DJ Dale. In the 2020 class, they did the same by landing Jamarian Latham, so Lee Hunter could come in and keep that trend going. He is currently verbally committed to Auburn. That is his dream school, but Alabama will still continue to push for him, as Alabama was able to grab 3 recruits in the 2020 recruiting class who were once verbally committed to Auburn at some point in their recruitment. When you look at Javion Cohen, Quandarius Robinson, and DeMoy Kennedy, those are all 3 guys who were once verbally committed to Auburn. They either flipped their commitment or decommitted from the Auburn Tigers and committed to Alabama a little bit later in their recruitment. So Lee Hunter is definitely a kid to keep an eye on. Tyreek Sapp, a 4-star defensive end out of St. Thomas Aquinas High School in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. It's another guy to keep an eye on. When you look at Sapp's recruitment, he is verbally committed to the Florida Gators. Another Gators commit who Alabama will look to recruit more during the 2021 recruiting cycle. This is a guy who has been committed to the Florida Gators ever since May of 2018. So when May of 2020 comes, he would have been verbally committed to the Gators for full 2 years, and he's also a home state kid from the state of Florida. So it's gonna be hard to flip him from the University of Florida. But Alabama has had a lot of success at St. Thomas Aquinas, especially in the 2019 recruiting class when they landed a defensive lineman in Braylon Ingram, and he also picked up a defensive back at the safety position in Jordan Battle. So Alabama will look to lean on those connections and possibly pull off some magic and possibly flip Sapp at some point. That'll do it for this edition of The Process. As always, thank you guys so much for joining me on Touchdown Alabama's YouTube page. Be sure to subscribe while you're here. Also, pick up a subscription to touchdowналabama.com. With that subscription, you'll be able to read all of our subscriber-only articles. Also, you'll be able to check out all of our recruiting profile breakdowns, scouting reports of each Alabama commit in the 2019, 2020, 2021, and future recruiting classes. Also, you'll be able to get your hands on our yearly print issue magazine. We are gearing up to release our issue for this year in a couple of weeks to talking about Lord Dogs Grace cover of this year's issue. So be sure to subscribe to touchdownalabama.com so you can get your hands on that issue. Also, download the Touchdown Alabama app. It is located in the Google Play Store as well as the Apple App Store. Be sure to download the app to stay updated on everything Alabama football and everything Alabama football recruiting news related. As always, I am Justice Smith, the scouting recruiting analyst for Touchdown Alabama magazine.